All right, welcome to Inside the Birds TV. It is Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan. And, as we knew would happen, Adam, last night when, and I say last night, I mean Wednesday night, when we were recording our Inside the Birds podcast, we wake up Thursday morning and ta-da, Howie Roseman has made a big deal. We did talk about it on the podcast, the interest in Darius Slay. It comes out, the trade has gone through. The Eagles have acquired a three-time Pro Bowl cornerback. So we're going to talk about Darius Slay. We're going to get into the contract, how they got him. You and I have a lot of interesting inside info, I think, that we can share that we didn't have at the time or weren't ready to put out on the podcast. And then we'll talk about some other moves that might be coming or not coming over free agency here. But obviously, we start with Darius Slay. You mentioned it on the podcast that the interest in Darius went way back. This isn't just because they struck out on Byron Jones. There was interest going back as far as last year at the trade deadline.
Yes. Yeah. So as I exclusively reported, and others now seem to hijack it, what really happened is...
Does that happen in our industry? I've never noticed that.
By the way, the Eagles are the ones, I'm told, by a Lions source who pulled out last year.
Mm-hmm.
The Lions wanted more than a second-round pick. Told by the source it was very close.
Mm-hmm.
And then Eagles decided not to do it. You know what? I don't know this, but just looking where this Eagles season was, right, in late October, looking at it, it didn't look like they were going to be a playoff team, if I recall correctly, where their record was and where the injury factor. So I could probably see why Roseman didn't want to give up a lot of compensation. Now this time around, Geoff, a 3 and a 5, it is their first three of the two. The other one's a compensatory pick, so they're giving up the number 85.
Right.
You know what? It's fair market value. The Lions told me that they wouldn't have done the trade unless they could have gotten the Eagles first, third. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to say after the Byron Jones situation unfolded, what is it, Monday? Was it Monday that he went there? I'm guessing.
It was Monday, yeah, first day in the evening.
So I'm going to say Tuesday, sometime Tuesday, they were talking somewhere around there, and Howie wasn't budging when he wanted to go with the compensatory third. And then they held out, and as I understood it, they got it. But what they really wanted was a second-round pick. And
right.
I'm based on what I've heard. Let me ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the Lions, would you rather have a second or a 3 and a 5? Because it could be a very bad two.
I think I'd rather have a second. And I say that because if I'm the Lions and their GM comes from the Patriots, I have to think that they do a lot of studies and numbers that that the further down you get, almost even out of the top 15 in the draft, your hit percentage gets lower and lower and lower. So if I'm the Lions and I have a second round pick as opposed to a 3 and a 5, not only is my hit percentage incrementally higher, but packaging a second round pick with anything else to help you move up in the draft is another asset that may not be at their disposal, as opposed to having a third and a fifth. I think a second round pick is even more attractive. However, if I'm the Lions now, picking in, what are they, third or fourth? I mean, you got to think that, you got to think Jeffrey Okudah would be a pretty big spot for them now that they've lost the corner.
By the way, so in all my reporting on Twitter I put out there, I must have gained about 500 Lions fans.
Oh, nice. All 500.
Yeah, hey, it's funny. I interacted with them. I for when there was downtime this week during free agency, I enjoyed it. It was pretty fun. I really didn't talk a lot of Lions fans before,
right?
But when I put there's some of the scoops I put out for the Lions this week, the transaction. So they asked me questions. They were asking me about Slay, and every time when the story came out that Slay was getting traded, all of them said Okudah. All of them did. Like they didn't even bring up anybody else. They're like, okay, it'll be Trufant and Okudah. I'm like, okay. By the way, though, line source tells me the kid from Penn State was a fifth rounder last year. They're very high on. He's gonna factor in to the way that they look at the cornerback position. Who the kid's name escapes me right now. You're Mr. Penn State.
I know. I should know it. You're not talking about man. How can I just now forget? I'm totally blanking.
Kind of an odd name. But
yeah.
Look. The bottom line is, as I look it up. The bottom line is when we look at this situation, we could sum this up.
Mm-hmm.
The Eagles got their corner. It will not preclude them from drafting a corner in the first 3 rounds. In fact, I'd be shocked if they didn't.
Right.
Let's summarize this, Geoff. So, if the season started today, what does the cornerback look like?
Well, it's got to be Darius Slay on one side, And I don't know, Adam. I mean, I think that you just said they're going to draft a corner. I agree with you that they are probably pretty high in the first 3 rounds. I think that person's going to be given a very good – if that guy can run and can learn this playbook fast enough, and we'll see what happens with all this, what might be delayed or canceled in the NFL. But I got to think that person is going to be given a pretty good chance to compete for the job. Right. I mean, you could do what Andy Reid did in the old days, kind of. If a guy's not ready, you could start Avonte Maddox on the outside with Slay, but in nickel, move him to the slot because that's where he's going to be best anyway, and then bring in your rookie or someone else to play the outside. Jim Schwartz has done that before. The question I have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, the kid, and as I look at their depth chart, the kid from Penn State was drafted in the 5th round last year. Amani Oru, I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, don't even try that.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at pronunciations, but I have no idea. I just know he's 6'1.5" and long.
Right.
And they're very high on the kid, and they say that he's going to factor into the position, so good for them. But you're right, Geoff, because look, Sidney Jones.
I forgot about Sidney Jones. I think he'll be given a shot. He'll be given a chance.
Well, right now, as I prefaced it, if the season started today, he would have to be because they don't have anyone else other than he. It's really he and Douglas. We've seen enough of Douglas. Final year of his contract, way too inconsistent. He's a 4th corner who, if you change your scheme now, schematically there are going to be some changes here. Let's talk. I'll before we move on from corner. One thing I do want to say is that I think you're going to see some changes here because I know a lot of people are wondering. The last 2 years they played man sides. When they played man, they didn't travel. That's because I think of personnel. They just didn't have the personnel to do it. With Darius Slay, like I was told with Ramsey, they would have obviously traveled him. He would have traveled. He would have played man press and also man off but traveled. But because when you don't have good enough corners, you're not going to put them in a position where they're going to travel. Now, the only difference is Maddox traveled. When Avonte Maddox, before he got hurt, Geoff, he would travel as the slot corner a lot.
Right.
Because he was so good.
Corner, yeah.
Yes. In nickel. From one of my sources told me who graded the tape. So there are going to be some changes. We mentioned the previous show. We actually mentioned on ITB. Folks definitely listen to it. We talked about the wide 9 and how there are going to be some cosmetic changes and approach. It's still going to be the wide 9 like always, but because they're so stacked now on personnel, particularly at defensive tackle, they'll be able to do some things. I'm not saying Malik Jackson will play some defensive end, but Geoff, it would not surprise me because the new kid's he's got to start.
All right.
He's got to be on the field.
Yeah, to talk about how this changes the defense. You have a guy in Slay who, and as long as he is what he's supposed to be, and we'll talk about that in a second, he gives you such an advantage that this team has not had in the last few years. If you think about how many times getting beat over the top, now a lot of that has also been on the safety, right? The advantage that he gives you that they didn't have in the past, if you have to play either a rookie corner or Rasul Douglas or Sidney Jones who's struggling on the other side, you can now have your deep safety shade toward that side and not worry about what you're giving up on Slay's side of the field. If you had that same scenario last year where you have Rasul Douglas on one side and then you had Sidney not playing well or Ronald Darby who's hurt not being able to run, you saw the safeties were getting confused. They were trying to rotate to one side, but then the other side would get exploited.
Minnesota game? Remember the Viking game?
That's exactly the type of game I was thinking of. That shouldn't be an issue anymore.
The Atlanta game too.
More than we'd like to count. So
yes.
One thing also that we should talk about with Slay, Adam, before we move on, is we've talked about this team's problem with vetting before or getting in bed with guys that they don't know a lot about. But one thing I was able to find out, and I said it on the podcast on how when it came down to picking in the second round in 2013, it was Zach Ertz and it was Slay, and they went with Ertz. But I found out that the team, when they went to his pro day, they spent a lot of time with Slay, and they even took him out to dinner afterward. They know what they're getting into with Darius Slay. This isn't a situation where they're bringing in a free agent who they don't have, like Namdi many years ago, who they only know the reputation and don't really know the person or the player, where Namdi's eating lunch in a car and they're kind of like, whoa, what's going on? Who is this guy really? They know Darius Slay very well. Went to the same school as Fletcher Cox and came out a year after. So if he doesn't work out, it's because something happened to him. At this point, there's no excuse for the coaches, for the front office, for the management not to have hit on a guy who's made 3 straight Pro Bowls.
All right, let me read you my line source. He was a very popular guy in our locker room and in the building with support staff. Extremely talented. He has a chance to be really good for Philly. Issue was really, I think, the contract and other factors where he wasn't as good. Now, when he didn't play as well in 19 as in 18. So I thought it was pretty cool. So as we're taping this, I'm going to say a couple hours ago, a friend who's in pro personnel for another team who's assigned the Lions, Geoff, for the season. He went over 18 and 19 because that's his job when he does advance for his team that he works for. He said, at his best, he's a top 3 corner in the National Football League. What this person said is he wonders if he'll get there again based on 19 play where he looked like 18 at times and he looked like he regressed is a hard thing to say, but he just was not as good. He had a couple of games where you go, wow, he does not look like a quality starting corner. There weren't a lot of them, but he did have a drop off. That's what the tape showed. That this is what we really talk about. It's tape. So the way I've gathered information on this guy, I think it's a good thing that he left. It's not a secret. He and Matt Patricia did not have a good relationship at all. I don't know if you saw some of the beat reporters after this interview that Slay did. Slay put it all out there. He didn't like Patricia. Patricia, again, based on what Slay said, according to him, Patricia was very negative toward him.
Right.
You know what? Sometimes guys need to change the scenery where it's not about the talent. They're in a better situation where being supported. And trust me, they'll be supported here.
And, of course, Jim Schwartz picked Slay when he was with the Lions. So, again, not have to worry about vetting or knowing the guy or any cohesion right now between the coaches. But what about the contract? I think it's important to note the difference because I've seen people say, well, if you were going to pay Slay that much and you wanted Byron Jones first, why didn't you just fork over a few more million for Byron Jones and be more competitive? But, Adam, I think people don't understand the difference between $57 million guaranteed and what did Slay get guaranteed out of that deal?
30. But remember, it was
that's
a 3-year
that's
deal
a
for
lot
Darius Slay.
more. Right, but that's a lot. You're talking about 27. You're talking about a cap hit if things didn't work out. I mean, we're all talking about the Alshon one right now. That would be very, very difficult.
There should I haven't seen the breakdown yet because it wasn't out, but I'll definitely get it. The typically the way that these deals are done, they should be able to get out after 2 years.
Right.
My guess, without looking, the $30 million comes in the first 2 seasons. It's just my guess.
I would agree. Yeah.
So if so you pay him $32 million over $30 million over 2 years, and you get out.
Right.
You got to be. Look, the good thing is, he's only a year and 4 months older than Byron Jones. It's pretty funny. People thought Byron Jones is 25. No, he's 27, and Slay just turned 29. So, but look, to finish this off, they've got to they don't have a number 2 corner right now. They have a bunch of 4s on the outside, which are Douglas and City Jones. And City Jones, look, he's on a contract year, though. I'm told he'll be restricted after the season because his contract will expire. But man, I'm to the point now. If he doesn't play well, I'm to the point now. You don't even tender him. That's how he's got to bring it, Geoff.
Oh, I would agree with you. I totally agree with you. He may not make the team coming out of camp. If he doesn't play well in camp, he may not make the team depending on how they look.
That would be extreme. Well, the only way that would happen though, if they let's say they draft a kid in the 3rd round, the guy starts,
right,
and maybe they draft 2 guys, or they add another corner in free agency. By the way, free agency, folks, doesn't end in March; it ends really in December. Who knows? They may add. I would expect them to add 2 more, one way or the other. Then your scenario could play out if you don't earn a roster spot. The thing that I've learned. It wasn't sometimes Roseman because he drafted a player, he keeps on the roster. Donnell Pumphrey was an example when he shouldn't have made it as a rookie.
Right.
Sometimes he sucks it up, Howie, and goes, you know what? We missed. And they cut the guy.
Yeah.
Because the coaches don't want the guy on the team, or he goes, you know what? I watched the tape and it didn't look good. So we'll see what happens.
Well, yeah, and we can do the numbers real quickly. If they only keep 5 corners or 6, you got Slay, you got Maddox, you got LeBlanc, you got Douglas, you got a guy you draft. That's 5 right there. So it's not going to be easy for Sidney Jones to just walk into a roster spot, especially if, as you said, they draft 2 corners pretty early.
Outside guys, they got to be outside.
Of course. All right, Yannick Ngakoue, I think I pronounced that correctly.
You did, nailed it.
He's killing everybody. Every Eagle fan right now on social media. He's got them like eating out of his palm with all of his Reggie White and Eagle icon. I don't know if you've checked out his Instagram
I saw
story.
it. I love it. I love it.
He's borrowing from the Slay playbook here.
Yeah. So okay. Here's my understanding. I've kind of known this for a while. The Eagles have some interest in him.
Yeah.
Folks, after they got Hargrave and they traded for Slay, I signed Hargrave, traded for Slay. I mean, I don't want to. People know I never do percentages. I just don't see it.
I'm with you.
I'm not saying the Eagles wouldn't like to acquire him. First of all, it's going to take, I believe, based on sources I've spoken with, at least a first-round pick. Okay, he's an elite speed rusher. He is a little smaller. The negative on him is he's just 6'2". He just turned 25, by the way. Great, high-character kid. Handled himself like a champ with all the issues with his contract and them not extending him. Tom Coughlin, I believe, was the problem in Jacksonville. Where Coughlin made the call. He had personnel control, and he decided not to. Geoff, they negotiated with him. They were somewhere around 18 and change last fall. He wants $22 million, and they weren't going to go there. So and he said he's not coming back. I mean, he's put it on his own Twitter account. That's a couple weeks ago. So to sum it up, folks, I never say never. I've learned my lesson. Saying that something's not going to happen and it falls right in my face. It happens every couple of years where I go, why the hell did I say that? But I'm a human. We're made to fail. But it would be a great fit because, man, do they need a speed rusher in the worst way?
Yeah.
How many times have we been saying this? 2 months, 3 months?
All off season long.
Yeah. Speed rushers would help.
Do you really think a team's giving up a 1 for him, though? Knowing that he there's no leverage on the Jags if he doesn't play.
No, he's playing. No, if you trade for him, you're extending his contract.
What I'm saying is he's making it so that he said he will not play for the Jags, right?
Yeah.
They franchise tagged him. He doesn't have to sign. He could do a Le'Veon Bell if he wants, or wait until November to sign and miss half the season. So the Jags are not in a great position here. Do you think they're going to turn down a second?
You said from leverage. Yeah. That's a great point. But here's the thing, though. Because he's such a unique football player, I know people brought up the Chandler Jones deal, which they only got a second. Well, what I had said when we brought this up before was Chandler Jones had a very odd off-the-field issue. The Patriots had no leverage. They had to move him. They didn't want him. Now, obviously, that was a home run for the Cardinals, and they paid him out the ass. He was paid. His contract was enormous. When Chandler Jones did that 3-4 years ago, that was a monster deal. Like, he had leverage. The kid had leverage, but I guess is the way you say it. But
I have trouble just putting him in the same. I mean, I like him, and he is a good speed rusher. He's had 1 of his 4 years where he's had more than 9.5 sacks. I feel like we're not like he's getting talked about right now like he's Reggie White.
No, but I think what happens is sacks are individual plays. What he does is he moves quarterbacks on the spot. Right. He continually wins. The one issue is because he's not big. You might throw him around a little bit if you get your hands on him, but his bend is incredible. He's really good. I mean, I would be very surprised if they get less than a 1, or if they do a 2, they don't get a good football player. It's going to be it's going to be one of those type of deals. And I do believe he'll be moved. I don't know where yet. It's early in the process. They don't need to do anything. Heck, Khalil Mack was traded in August 2 years ago. So it's about value, and he's a good kid. He's young. Great. But Dave Caldwell nailed that, the GM of the Jaguars. It was a 3rd-round pick at 16. That was the last year that Dave had control. 17, 18, and 19, he did not.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, last thing we should finish up on, and we really kind of did address it in the podcast, but it won't go away, so we should keep talking about this. And that's the idea that the Eagles will come out of this thing with a wide receiver, because that's the position they need to address the most. And you've said it. I've said it. We've talked to our people. We're not sensing that the Eagles feel hell-bent on getting a wide receiver in free agency and paying that money. But the more we do these podcasts, right, and the days go by, you've noticed that none of these wide receivers other than Cooper have signed. And as the days go by, the numbers usually go down. And you wonder if at some point the Eagles might say, you know what? This guy's now asking for a whole lot less, whether it's Perriman, whether it's Anderson. You wonder if they get involved.
Look, as we when we were at the Combine, when I reported exclusively for our listeners that the Eagles were not going to get involved in free agency at receiver, I still don't believe it. And you just brought that subject up, and I agree with you. If you and I were running the show, we're signing Brashad Perriman. Yeah. We're going to get an out after 1 year, and we're getting this done. We're also going to draft someone who could run. Now, whether it's Rager, we're going to do draft stuff later, but in future shows for our show. But bottom line is, Geoff, they need speed. As one person said, who's a very vital person on the National Football League, the more speed you have, the more it helps everybody. What's wrong with having three guys who could run? They've got one in Deshaun who can't stay on the field. He's not healthy enough.
Right.
Okay, he's healthy now, but he's had trouble staying healthy.
Sure.
So you tell me, Geoff, what's wrong with signing him?
I don't see anything wrong. It does feel like Howie is again looking at the bigger picture, at the compensatory pick formula. Right now, they've added a lot, but they've only signed one free agent in Hargrave.
That's a great point, man. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah,
they lost Big V to a big contract.
Yeah.
They stand to actually do well again in the maybe even one or two picks next year. We'll see what happens because they've lost more than they've right. They've lost Big V to a big contract.
Yeah.
And anybody else? They lose anyone else to a contract?
I don't know offhand, but let me just say one thing about the comp formula. It's a great point you make.
Mm-hmm.
Waiting to May till they don't count versus getting a guy who's a slam dunk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just about being great.
Right.
By the way, they still have 8
real
picks
quick.
left.
Jordan Howard actually signed a formidable contract.
Oh yeah,
with the
there you
Dolphins.
go. There's another
and
one.
And Camus signed with the Dolphins, so they've lost 3 free agents, and they've only signed one.
And I'm sure again another excellent point. I'm sure that has something to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a little bit different I'm a little bit more provincial in my thinking. I think you really need to try to win. And when a young speed receiver who turns just 27 later this year, who has overcome injury history and drops, he was tremendous. Talking to the Bucs, they were blown away with how well he played when he needed to play.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a great kid, son of you might remember Brett Perriman, former Lions receiver,
sure,
offense with Scott Mitchell,
and
Herman Moore. So I'm an apologist. Don't ask me why. I just like the kid. I've been a fan.
No, I like the kid too. I would sign him. I'm with you.
Yeah. So that's that.
All right, so that'll wrap it up for this edition of Inside the Birds TV. Make sure you're checking out the podcast, Inside the Birds, on every major podcast platform. Want to thank, of course, DraftKings. You can still put bets on futures for any of the sports. So download the nation's #1 sports rated app, DraftKings, and make sure you're using that to place any bets. Thank our friend Hunter Brody, who helps put us together, and all of our great affiliates, BHL Sports Nation and 97.3 ESPN. Now, look, we got a great Andrew DeCecco, who writes for InsideTheBirds.com, and I hope everybody subscribes. Please subscribe. It's free. Go to InsideTheBirds.com, subscribe. You'll get all the content that we're putting out. He's done a tape breakdown, an all-22 breakdown of Javon Hargrave, so that should be up on the website by Friday afternoon at the latest. So look forward to that. Shows his strengths, his weaknesses. It's very comprehensive. Adam and I will continue to be adding content on the YouTube, on the website, and also the Inside the Birds YouTube page where you're watching this right now. So make sure you please subscribe to that as well. And that'll do it for this edition of Inside the Birds TV. Catch you guys on the next one.